Welcome to the Susan Sheehan Podcast, and welcome. This is Susan, and I'm joined today by Claire O'Neill. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you very much for having me.
We were just giggling there because I was telling Claire that that I had literally just painted the room this morning. I got up at like 7:30 and painted a part of the room. And she was saying how much like birth or just before birthing that you literally go mad and start painting everything. And we were saying the symmetry between this is the first episode of inviting women in to share their stories. And that literally, so we're birthing it. Claire is birthing it with me, birthing this new chapter of the Susan Sheehan Podcast. So, Claire, thank you so much for coming in today to tell your story. Shall I share first how we met? So we met last April above in Dublin. We're both in Ireland. Above in Dublin for workshops with Jane Hardwick Collins, who at some stage I just know will be on this podcast. I haven't asked her yet, but I will. And we just really clicked, didn't we, Claire? So I am so pleased to have you here. I suppose first, do you want to introduce yourself and where you are and a little bit about yourself? And then, we can dive into your story.
Thanks, Susan. So I am Claire O'Neill. Like Susan said, we met earlier this year in April in Dublin under the spell of Jane Hardwick Collins, and we sat beside each other. I think first of all, actually, we sat opposite each other on the first day, and I know we were called back for more, and we really connected then, where we shared the same love for cycles. My background is I am an actuary. I did a maths degree. I would have put myself very much in that kind of logical headspace of, I suppose, following a very typical life of, doing really well in exams at school, going and doing a maths degree in London, and then getting the corporate job and training for years to qualify as an actuary. And then life sort of took me on a bit of a different path, and then that's how we ended up meeting each other in Dublin, and here we are.
Yeah, and what's an actuary, Claire?
Oh, what a question!
No, in a very short, like for some of the listeners may not know.
You're right. So there's two different types of actuaries. Some specialize in insurance, some specialize in pensions, and I tend to be advising companies on their pension strategy, their benefit strategy. Perfect. So a million miles away from talking about birth, breastfeeding, menstrual cycles, all the stuff that that I love to talk about.
So that's a nice segue in, isn't it? Yeah. So that's all the head stuff, like the actuary, and very logical, and I suppose like more the masculine, and yeah. And what we met at in Dublin was the first day was all around cycles and cyclical living, and then the second day was shamanic pregnancies, the dimensions of shamanic pregnancies. And today I was just asking you beforehand because I had a very strong sense when I wanted to do this that you immediately came into mind. And as I said to you on your message, I've just, this for the listeners, I WhatsApped Claire with a voice note and went, I don't know what your story is, but I have a sense that you have a story to tell, and I think that the women would love to hear it. And I heard a tiny fraction of, I was hoping the story that you'd share today at that day, but there was 20 women in the room, and so it was a snapshot we got. But today you're going to talk about the birth of your child. So I'm going to hand over the mic to you to hear from you, and start wherever you want to start, and weave your beautiful story. I can see there's a sewing machine behind you, and there's beautiful art behind you. So, we'll bring all that flair with you.
Thank you. So I usually start the story at the point when I was 16 weeks pregnant. But I think, on reflection, I think it does start a bit before that. It starts with me being in that real actuarial, mathematical, extremely planned place in my life where I had planned the conception of my first child to a T. Like, it was planned so that I would have just finished a huge project that I would have worked on for 3 years, that I would be promoted, and that I would turn 30. And all three of those things happened in July 2018, which is the same month that my first son was born in. And it was, I look at it now as so symbolic to me of that is just classic how I lived my life, with everything planned out to just the most minute detail that there possibly could be. And I know just I know how ridiculous that sounds to so many women who would that just wouldn't even be a possible thing for them to be thinking about. But at that time, that's how my life worked, and it did happen that way for me. But I'll go back to the starting point where I normally start the story, and that was when I was 16 weeks pregnant, and things started changing for me then. I have always had medical related anxiety. So I can relate it right back to being when I was at school and had to get an injection and I fainted afterwards. And I think that really sort of set me off on this whole lifetime of, I suppose, distrust of the medical profession. Even though I could very much logically, see through a different lens, I felt very scared in the presence of doctors, nurses, any kind of medical professionals. And when I was 16 weeks pregnant, I had an appointment at the hospital, and the letter arrived with no information as to why I needed to go to this appointment. I knew it wasn't going to be with the midwives, but I didn't know why I was being called in. And even that lack of knowledge had me, just so worked up, so anxious as to why I would have to go. And I suppose I should maybe explain that in the north, there's the midwifery care and there's the consultant-led care. And so I had been booked in by the midwives, and that was outside of a hospital setting. So it wasn't a GP surgery, but that felt more sort of accessible to me than walking into hospital. Okay. And for that 16-week appointment, I had a panic attack. I had a panic attack in the car park, and I couldn't get myself into the hospital. My husband came and did get me in, but I was completely shut down and frozen and couldn't speak and just on edge. And we went in to see the consultant, and the consultant said to me, "Sure, what have you got to be anxious about? Everything's fine." And entirely dismissed that I couldn't even really speak. And I came away from that appointment thinking, if I can't even get through an appointment in here, how on earth am I going to give birth in a hospital? It's just not going to happen. And so that's when I had to really start thinking and doing my research and working out what I was going to do to make this possible. And I did my usual approach of being very analytical, and I started reading everything that I could possibly get my hands on. I really started thinking that a home birth would be the only way that I would be able to give birth to this baby.
That's such a leap, Claire, isn't it? So, from because
Hugely.
most people can't most people can't even conceive that the fear of having a home birth would be I guess most people can't even conceive having a birth at home because they've never seen it or heard it, I guess. And actually they would have, I suppose,
Yeah.
they believe that there's more safety in by, you know, handing that over to others. So that's a huge I don't know. Maybe it wasn't for you. Was it a huge leap of faith?
No, it was huge.
Yeah.
It was absolutely huge, but it wasn't. It was more for me that the fear of the hospital was so much greater because I knew my body wasn't going to be able to do what it needed to do. And because I'd been reading all about oxytocin and all the hormones and the environment that your body needed to give birth, and, you know, thinking about if you go back to cave women or you think about animals and you think about how cats give birth, you know, kind of hide away in a corner rather than put themselves into an environment with, well, effectively strangers and bright lights. You know, if you can get into that mindset, well, that's where I was. I knew that my body was not going to be able to relax enough to give birth in a hospital, and so I needed to take some action on that. And I had been doing the research, looking at the statistics, and in Northern Ireland the home birth rate was so low that I thought I was going to be facing, you know, a massive uphill battle. The first battle being that I needed to tell my husband that this is what I was thinking about. And so when I did have we need to have a conversation. When I sat my husband down to say we need to have a conversation, he went into panic mode. He thought I was breaking up with him or something. He thought I had built it up to be such a serious topic of conversation that he was completely relieved whenever I said that I wanted to have a home birth. He was totally on board from the start. But I think I may have really worked it up. This was a huge deal to make that choice.
It is a big choice, and it's a leap of faith for him as well, because with partners, they're the ones that have to watch us go through it. They have to watch the woman go through it. Yeah. And it's then like they're responsible almost, they feel a responsibility almost to then be the one to be responsible in that, especially when there's a liminal space there of and they're maybe being looked to by their partner and maybe the medical professionals to, we need to make a decision here potentially if it comes to that, right? So to take out a whole, which is like we have been taught to, you know, as women birthing, that the best place is in the hospital. Like that's a big shift as well for partners to make, right?
It is. It's absolutely a huge shift for them to make, and that's where we both threw ourselves into hypnobirthing, and we did an in-person course. I had a lovely woman come to our house, and we sort of split it over 2 weekends, and we went in depth into kind of, well, because whenever you're doing hypnobirthing in a house where you're going to have a home birth, you can really connect then to, you know, what it could be like. I think before you have your first child, you can't fully imagine what it's going to be like. It's like nothing can really truly prepare you, but you can get as close as you can from the other side of it. And thankfully, he was right by my side with it all and totally on board. The next thing that I needed to do really was persuade the midwives that I could do it and that they should indeed put a rota on for me. And I'm very conscious of the language there that I'm using around sort of them allowing me to do it, and versus the reality, which is that it's always your choice. And you do get a choice in these things. It's that you're up against the system, and whether they have the right resources to support you. And so I quite early on started asking. So there was this magical moment when I was in this antenatal class with the midwife, and she said, "Oh, sorry, everybody. I just need to keep my phone. I can't put it on silent. I need to keep it on loud because I'm on call for a home birth." And that was like music to my ears, because when I had been doing the research, I thought there's basically none that happen in Northern Ireland. I'm just going to be laughed out of here. But when the midwife, whose classes I was attending, said that, I suddenly had this real like glimmer of hope that this might be possible, might be able to do it. I spoke to her, and I wouldn't say she was jumping for joy. she was very neutral about it, and it was we'll see how things go. But she didn't shut me down outright, which is what I needed. I needed that glimmer of hope, because then I could kind of build my case, show how determined I was, and their nervousness was all around me being a first-time mother. That was the main sort of hesitancy from their side.
Why is that? Why hesitancy about first-time mom?
Well, it's a tricky question, because one of the midwives said out loud that we don't know how your body births. And I let that gloss over me at the time because I needed to. But now that comment can really annoy me when I think about it. That sort of complete distrust that a woman's body can do this first time round, and that you need to do it in a hospital first before you can do it at home, as if you're passing some sort of a test. And also that the more I know now, the more I advocate for you having your baby at home first time, because that's how you're going to set yourself up for the best outcomes and the best experience for you and your baby. And therefore, second, third, however many more babies you want to have, you've set yourself up in the best way, rather than this attitude of you need to do it in a hospital first, which doesn't set you up to have the best experience.
Yeah, I did a workshop with a woman in Limerick, and the amount of first-time mums, it was for couples actually, is gentle birthing, and the amount of the couples that were now having their second child that had their first child in hospitals with an undesirable outcome, either there was trauma or they just felt like they didn't have any autonomy in the choices they were making. And now they were like, this is not happening again. I'm taking control of it this time. So it's interesting that they were questioning your first time. Yeah. So this was your first birth. So what happened next? And can you explain to me, Claire, what is hypnobirthing?
Oh, hypnobirthing is it's a whole set of techniques. So some people would sort of dismiss it as a bit too woo-woo or a bit too hippie or a bit too out there, and it really depends on who you speak to, because some will go hard down this is scientific, and we actually teach you about what's happening to the muscles in your body, about why it is that those muscles are designed to deliver your baby here safely. Others will go right down there. Well, no, there is a more sort of spiritual element to it, and it's much more holistic. So it depends. That's why there's such a range of hypnobirthing teachers out there, and you kind of want to find the right person who's on the right level for you. But it's a combination of that knowledge, like that real in-depth knowledge as to how your body is going to birth this baby, and the techniques that you can use around it. So the visualization, the breathing, the affirmations, a whole combination of techniques that can really support you during pregnancy. So you can use this every day during your pregnancy to center yourself, or to feel that you are, doing that preparation for the birth, and then through the birth as well. And those births can be, so I know of women that have used the techniques even when having a cesarean to really help center them, and help them to focus on breathing, and I suppose enjoying the experience as much as possible.
And so coming back to you then, were you doing this on a day? You had a woman come in and take you and your partner through this. And then what, did you practice this every day? How did it pan out?
I did. I went into I suppose you could say that I studied for birth like I would study for an exam, and I studied every day. Before going to bed, I put on those hypnobirthing tracks, and I fell asleep, basically drifting off to a meditation. And I'd never in my lifetime before getting pregnant, I'd never been into that type of thing at all. I'd never really connected with my body before I was pregnant. It was such a turning point for me to actually kind of sink into my own body and feel what I was really feeling, and feel into that intuition. And so I listened to those relaxation tracks every night. And then I say that when I was in labor, it was muscle memory, that I knew how to relax my muscles because I had practiced it every night, drifting off to sleep. And when I was in labor, my body at times felt like it was just drifting off to sleep, rather than sort of, feeling fearful or pain or anything. Instead, I was really in the zone.
What was it like? Would you mind sharing your birth with us then?
Yes. So I woke up one morning, and I was officially I was 41 plus 3. There was a discrepancy over my dates because I couldn't have been 41 plus 3, because me and my husband were in different countries at that whatever point of conception that would have made. So I was pretty sure I was 40 plus 5. And I woke up that morning and thought, oh, actually I feel something. This is a little bit different. And to me, it felt like a period cramp, that kind of little dull ache. And my husband headed off to work, and I was more than happy for him to head off to work, because I wasn't entirely sure that I could really feel something. But I spent the whole day thinking, this might be something. And my husband phoned me at lunchtime, and I said to him, could he go and buy a bucket? Because I'd a bit of concern around, would we get this birth pool filled up, and what if we needed a bucket? And so he went to Tesco and bought the bucket. But I didn't tell him that I thought I was actually in labour, and that it's going to be in any way imminent. But he arrived home at 6 p.m. he had the bucket, and I told him that I thought things might be happening. And so I'd had the whole day up until that point. I was enjoying my maternity leave so much. I was going to see friends, I was going out for walks. But that day I really felt kind of called home. Like I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to just be in my own real safe space. And I'd even struggled, like bouncing on my ball and all the things that you're supposed to do. Instead, I had just really wanted to be kind of in a relaxed state on my own. And he came home and I told him, and it was a bit of, oh, really? Is this happening? I said, well, I think, I might give the midwives like a heads up that this has been going on all day. But it was, I was there having a totally normal functioning conversation. There was nothing painful about it. I could just, notice that things were happening. And so I gave the midwife a heads up, and she replied with a lovely, lovely message. And that night, which I will never forget, was the Love Island final. And we were on the sofa, and I thought, this is like another thing. This baby couldn't be born until I'd watched the Love Island final. And so I couldn't make it up the stairs because things were starting to get a little bit, they were getting a little bit more intense. And so that was sort of 11 p.m. ish, and my husband was falling asleep on the other sofa, and I had to send him up to bed because he was snoring, and I was disturbing my peace of the little bit of sleep that I was trying to get between contractions, basically. But it got to the point where I couldn't really sit. I couldn't stay on the sofa. Like things were getting intense, and I got into this routine where I would be on the sofa, I would feel a contraction coming, and I would get up and I would walk around my kitchen island. And sort of by the end of the contraction, I would be at the same spot where I could rest for another few minutes, and then it would start again. And I was in this pattern for quite a few hours, I think. But time is stretchy when you're in labour, so I don't really know how long it was. And at one point I was doing this, I was doing my same routine, my same walk around, and I felt the pop, and oh, my waters went, and that was the point when I realized, oh my goodness, this is really real. I'm actually going to have this baby. Like this. And I woke my husband up, and I called the midwife. But I couldn't really speak. So I wasn't really making any noise at this time. I was just doing my breathing. I was just doing my visualizations in the zone, and I couldn't speak. And she was trying to get me to speak, and I was just silent for a bit. And then she said, "Do you need me to come now? Or do you want to wait another while?" And I was like, "No, this is the time, I think, for you to come." And so she did. And she phoned the other midwife, and they came out, and suddenly things changed when they were there. And I felt like they were looking at me. And when I felt like I was being watched, that was making things really intense for me. And I was asking them not to look at me, and they were saying, "Oh, we're not looking at," and I believe that they weren't, but I felt like there were these eyes on me. And so they were brilliant. They left me alone. They went and they helped James to set up the pool, and at that point, they were saying, if you want to give birth in water, then we need to get this set up now, which was another confirmation that things were really happening. And I was actually a bit scared of the water. I'm not a water baby, and I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to change what I was doing and get into the pool. But I decided to give it a go. And so I got in, I didn't have this instant. Sometimes you hear people talk about like a magical feeling of relief, and mine wasn't fully that, but it was oh, this might be okay. And then I'd say after 3 contractions, I was away. I was so in love with the water, and I'd melted into it. And we got the hypnobirthing tracks were playing, and like I said earlier about the muscle memory thing, I have this real clear memory of my nose was hitting the top of the water because I was falling asleep listening to my music. And that's just how much of a relaxed state that I was in. And I had the midwives who were just angels. They sat on the stairs outside of the room. They came in every 20 minutes to half an hour really to check on us. And then otherwise they just left me and my husband to it. He talks about how he really made a big mistake. He didn't get himself a chair at the side of the pool. And whilst he was there, like there was no chance I was going to let hold of his hand, let go of his hands. I was gripping firmly. And he said he was looking longingly over at a chair at the other side of the room, wishing that he had really brought it over, but knowing better than to say anything at all. Just save the story for afterwards. But I had such a wonderful experience in that water, and I really felt my baby. I felt him. I felt my body move through the different points of labour. I felt the point when my womb decided that it was time to push would be the traditional way to say it, but it wasn't like I was actively pushing. I felt my body move into more of a pushing stage. And there was a bit of confusion for me where I didn't know what my body was doing. Was it telling me to push? Was it not? The contractions felt like they had changed, and I had a bit of a panic where I was, saying to the midwives, I think I need you to examine me. And they were so good. They didn't want to, basically. They didn't want to disturb me, and they knew that I was in the transition phase. I just didn't know that I was in transition. But they persuaded me to hang on in there, and that soon, I would feel the change. And I did, and I felt those muscles turn downwards where they were just sort of expulsing the baby. And this point, you read so much as to how long it's going to take for all these different phases. And I had all this stuff I could feel running through my mind. But time is weird. Time is stretchy. I just don't have full grasp of how long this stuff is taking. But I could feel the baby coming down and then going back up again. And I had never felt so glad that the day before I had read an article about how this would happen, or how this sometimes happens to women, where the baby's head is just simply sort of making way, stretching things a little bit, and then it can go back, and then it'll have another little go, and then back again. And this is what I felt. So I felt this happening, externally, but I also felt it internally. I just need to check here that there is actually a baby, that there's a baby coming. And so in the pool and check that I could feel the baby's head coming down. And I know to some people that is, I have some friends, when I say that, they're just outraged, and that's the most disgusting thing they could ever imagine. But to me, it is just the opposite. It's completely magical feeling that baby coming down. And then he came out little bit by bit. He came out with in a superhero pose with his hand up on his face, desperate to wave, to say hello. But he was born into water, and I scooped him up. I scooped him up and put him on my chest, and he didn't make a sound. He just looked. And that is exactly the way that he is now, still as a 6-year-old. He looks, he observes, he takes everything in. And when he was born, that is exactly what he was doing. He was just looking around him, taking it all in. And the midwife said to me, "That's so special. You're the first person to put your hands on your baby." And I had never thought of that before. That wasn't part of my birth plan. And I'd really thought about my birth plan, but I hadn't thought of just how special that was to be be the one to hold my baby. I'm the one that he has known, throughout that whole pregnancy, and I'm the first one to touch him and bring him onto my body.
So beautiful, Claire. So magical and powerful to hear you say that. It's and we don't hear this story. And I get goosebumps when you said when you said about the midwife saying that that you're the first one to touch your own baby, who you have nurtured and nourished, and you've grown together, isn't it? And you've birthed together.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was such a, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but there was such a conversation between me and that baby throughout that whole birth, throughout all of my births. I really felt that connection of we are doing this together, and what do you need me to do? What way do you need me to move my body so that you can come into this world and we can do this together?
Can you explain that? Like, what's that conversation like that you're having with your baby? What is it? A sense? What is it?
Yeah, it is a sense. And actually, I think do you remember when we were in April with Jane and she talked about I don't know what terminology she used, but like your primary sense, and that everyone sort of has a different way of, mine is real visualization. And I could see this baby. So I know some people hear it much more. I really am like, it's like a visual kind of conversation to me of, I don't know how to explain it, but can I kind of see from an external point of view and also see from the baby's point of view of just whatever way we are communicating to each other. I wish I could put that into words in a better way, but it's much more visual in my head than me being able to say it.
Yeah.
It isn't great for a podcast to know.
No, but like even you using those words, I can sense what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like I can tune into what you're. Well, this is the way I'm hearing it. Is and actually, what it's coming through to me is that it's like you could see his journey as he was going, as the two of you were doing it together. Almost that you can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so beautiful.
And so that was the most like life-changing point. It changed my life so much. I actually couldn't believe that I had done it. And I mean, I actually did it. Like that was it was, I know I had prepared for it, but it was still such a shock that I had managed to do this. And then afterwards they told me that I was the first time mum in my trust to have had a home birth that team had supported. And so that did explain a bit more, I suppose, of why they were reluctant, not necessarily reluctant, but they weren't jumping for joy at me wanting to do it because they hadn't had a first time mum do it before. And it really set me on kind of, I feel like, a mission to connect to first time mums, to get them to understand that of course they can do it. Like, there's nothing special about me, right? I was able to do this. So if I can do it, of course you can do it as well. We can all do this. It's just about changing that narrative and society's expectations, and really getting back to our own bodies and our own intuition and our own knowledge, and remembering that we do know how to do this. We just have to strip back all the layers that we've been told and how we've been molded over all these years.
And do you know what I love as well is, like, so you weren't into any, because some people would be like, oh, all this menstrual cycle woo-woo stuff and blah, 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 blah. You weren't into any of this before you were 16 weeks with your first baby.
No.
I love that because, and you know what I
Not
love
at
as
all,
well is,
Susan.
do you know what I love as well is this will speak to so many women because we have to do our homework as well because nobody has taught us this, right? I won't speak for you, but I know that my mum and I wasn't taught this. I don't think she probably knows it either. I can't speak for my mum, right? But basically, we've lost this knowledge because it's probably only a couple of generations back in Ireland, I would say, because we were definitely having home births like 2-3 generations before, like no more than that. But like it's
Yeah.
so important to do the homework. So your actuary there's no coincidences. So if anyone is listening to this, if you're listening to this and you are those who know me will know that I come from a similar background as Claire in terms of like that I'm a qualified accountant. And so to do your homework and get the facts is so important. And you can still bring those facts, bring all that knowledge in, and then tune into your body. And maybe it's a blend of both, and it's everyone will have their own unique perspective in how you come to it. But I suppose one of the things that I'm taking away from this is if you're going into your first birth or your fifth birth, if you don't know some of this, is to dive into it. There's loads of books out there. There's loads of podcasts. There's listening to Claire's story. There's finding out about what are the stages of birth, isn't it? And so then that you can almost, it's like being an accountant. It's like you do all the study and then you forget the most of it, right? Then you just do the job, right? You don't remember I don't remember half of what I studied because I don't need to. Then you can do it. You can lean back and just go. Your instinct will take you the rest of the way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's very important to that empowering and inspiring aspect of it is that anyone can do this.
Absolutely, anyone can do this, and it's about finding the right support as well. I often get questions from people saying, "Oh, I've talked to my family about this, and they're really discouraging me," which I understand completely. And I often say, before you tell anybody, like think about who the right people are that you want to have as your cheerleaders, because like we talked about earlier with partners, that sometimes your family, like your mother may have had a very bad experience, or you may have had different family members who will then tell you the horror stories of what happened to them, and that can really unnerve you and can unsettle you. And so you just might want to think about who are the right people who are going to have your back and really support you through this. And so you might find that network in different ways, but I would really encourage you to find the right cheerleaders if you want to find somebody at all.
Yeah. And Claire, like your story is like, isn't it incredible for those two midwives that were supporting you to see you in that and it's a primal, powerful state, right? Because the fact that they'd never seen it before means that you have opened up this door to so many more women in your trust and in the area and whoever else they go on to work with, that it's like, oh, this is possible. This first time mom did it, showed us the way that it can be done, and they can now open up that door because of you to that happening for other women. I think that's so incredible. That's such a, I don't want to use the word legacy, but that is just that it is part of your legacy that you have opened that door for other women, Claire.
Well, one of the midwives actually trained to be a hypnobirthing teacher afterwards, because she had never seen it happen like that. It was so impactful on her, and she turned up with, they both turned up with cards and everything for me, like rather than it being me thanking them. It was just incredible, because like you said, they hadn't witnessed that, if I use the word power, that they hadn't witnessed that power, and especially not from somebody who was doing it for the first time. And I'm so grateful for them setting me off on that journey, because that's what enabled me to go and have baby number 2 and 3. And, I had baby 2 at the height of COVID, and, all home birth services were down, and I had to really dig deep and say, no, I'm staying at home. And they facilitated it for me, which was brilliant. But yeah, it really set me up then on a path of that power, and of knowing my own power and knowing my own body. And I so desperately want for other women to know just how powerful they are.
And natural. It's such natural.
Yeah.
I want to say process. It's not quite the word. But it's so natural. Is there anything else that you could add to that?
Yeah, I would just add, I think you've already mentioned it really, Susan, but I would soak up all the information. There's some amazing books out there, podcasts, Rachel Reed, anything with her, anything with Sara Wickham. There are just incredible women out there doing great work to share the information, to share the actual evidence that are challenging the narrative. I would soak up as much information as you can at this stage, and do you just want to say, I was going to say enjoy it, but I did find pregnancy itself is it's not always enjoyable, but I enjoyed giving birth. Like people look at me like I have 10 heads, but I say, if I could give birth every day, I would do it. That's how incredible giving birth can be. It is the peak oxytocin that you will, it's the highest high that you can ever have in your life. I just couldn't quite cope with, continuing to feed and grow and have a whole house full of children. But the giving birth bit for me is so incredible that I desperately want other women to experience that.
Wow. We have got to finish on those words, the highest of high. Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your story, for telling your story, for allowing us to hear it and to see it. Yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone wants to message Claire or ask her a question or just share with her thank her for hearing her story, you can find her on Instagram. I'll share it in the show notes anyway. She's the Mother Sphere, and it's Claire O'Neill. I will share it in the show notes. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's been wonderful to talk.
Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing. Every share, like, and subscribe to this podcast means another woman gets to find this wisdom and return back home to herself. So until next week, have a wonderful time and look after yourself.